Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with an attorney, and we're going to talk about buying businesses. Ken, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what are you up to?
Okay, so I am a corporate transactional attorney, handle corporate transactions and related real estate, commercial real estate. Uh, I'm in Orlando, Florida, and I am very busy these days and pleased to be on your show and talk a little bit about what's going on in the business community with buying and selling businesses.
Sounds good. So, we were introduced through a business broker who's a record-breaking business broker, Michael Shea. He's in your area, not too far. And he said, you got to talk with my buddy, Ken. Him and I do a lot of deals together. Kind of like, what is your relationship in the world of buying and selling businesses between you and a business broker like Mike?
So I do work with Mike. He's a great guy. He's somebody who gets deals done, and he and I think appreciate working together because that's sort of my philosophy too. I'm not here to be a no, you can't do that guy. I'm here to say, what do you want to get done and how do we get it accomplished? In working with brokers, that is something that I do very regularly. And so I have really two parts of my business, in the sense that a lot of the business brokers are doing smaller deals, maybe under $1 million, a couple $1 million. And so I do a number of those deals where the business brokers are bringing me in to help one side or the other, or to help just close the transaction based on the contract that they've already signed. And I also have the other part of my practice where I work with buyer and seller, and we may have maybe a more sophisticated broker who does bigger deals, or an investment banker, and we're doing larger deals. And most of my deals are in Central Florida and in the Florida region, or in the state of Florida. Sorry. So, and most of those deals that I work on are in, up to about 30 or 40 million is about where we go, just because there aren't that many bigger deals here.
Got it. So you and I go back in time when we're hanging out with you. You just graduated high school, and we go, Ken, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
The funny thing is, before high school, I would have said I wanted to be a lawyer. That's what I wanted to be growing up. My dad is a lawyer, my stepmother, my grandmother, my uncle, on and on. So that's sort of where I was headed. In high school, I got very involved in music and started doing a lot of music stuff, and thought that's the direction I wanted to go. So that's what I would have told you back then. But then into college, I got involved in politics and headed right back into law school. So it ended up where I started.
How does politics, because everybody, they're like, I'm going to study poli-sci and I'm going to go, get into law or politics itself. Like, why do attorneys a lot of times come from, political, science backgrounds?
Well,
or did I completely screw up those titles and I have no clue what I'm talking about?
You're correct. I
Okay.
have a political science degree and was involved in politics. And it kind of goes hand in glove because of the legislature and the Congress, the governor, the president, state level, local level, federal level. They're all dealing with laws. And so the political process, while a lot of it we're focused on who's being elected, really day to day, a lot more of it is about how what laws are being made, what's actually happening, and how does that impact our community and our businesses and everything that's going on. And so you take that, and as a lawyer, you learn a different side of it from politics. Rather than the who's working with who to get something done, it's more about the nuts and bolts of what does the Constitution say, what does the state law say, how do we interpret those laws, how do we help folks to navigate the bureaucracy that's created because of those laws and those politics.
Yeah. So you said you studied music. So you were born into a family of attorneys, grandmother, dad, uncles, right? So like
Right.
Thanksgivings probably were a lot of arguments and fights, right? The debate. But you studied, you were like, all right, I'm getting out of this. I'm going music. What were you studying? What kind of music did you enjoy playing?
It was a variety, and it just started in middle school and through high school into college. I was did a variety of things. I played the oboe, actually, is my principal instrument. I also played saxophone and bass guitar.
Okay. So my
Right.
wife plays bass guitar, and I used to play saxophone for like one little semester. I played
Nice.
the baritone.
Okay. Yep.
It was the big one, right?
Yeah. I played tenor primarily in marching band, but occasionally picked up a baritone sax. I think a jazz band maybe for a little bit, and did the bass and jazz band as well. So
Out of
yeah.
all of those, which are you the best at? Like if we were to start a band, you and me today, what would you bring to the table?
If we're doing a band, I probably would look at saxophone.
Yeah. What kind of music should we play?
Oh boy. My I would probably look more towards kind of folk rock, James Taylor,
Yeah.
maybe showing my age a little bit here, but Neil Young, things like that, I really enjoy.
Yeah. Now you didn't expect these kind of questions on a business talk show.
I did not, but it's fun. Go ahead.
All right, sounds good. All right, so here we are. You switched back over into getting into the legal side of things. What made that switch from music back over to this?
He really was getting involved in politics in college, and a realization that I went to Florida State University, and I was in the marching band there, and started out as a music major, and I, to be honest, was having too much fun, and so I needed to get out of the band. For me, I decided it wasn't going to be a career, and so I needed to go some different direction. Went to political science. Because I enjoyed politics, have worked in the legislature, and my dad, who I said is a lawyer, my stepmom, worked as lobbyists in Tallahassee. So that led me to working with them and into the politics from there.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're in Tallahassee going to FSU, like that's in your backyard. You're seeing it. You're seeing, Congress, you're seeing all these, politics come in and out. So that's the people that you rubbed elbows with. All right. So you choose law. Now, why, as you're going through law school and going through that process, why did you choose corporate law rather than, injury or defense or this or that?
Well, it was a little bit of a twisted path for me the first couple of years. When you get out of law school, I actually thought I was going to go into land use law, was where I thought I would start. I have a certificate for undergraduate in urban regional planning. And so I really enjoyed that. And I sort of put that together with desire to do land use. But as I was graduating school, I had some friends in Orlando who had a law firm and invited me to come and work with them in the summers. And it was a sort of a natural fit. And they did employment law. And so I actually started doing employment law for businesses. And we represented a lot of big companies in Orlando, most of the Fortune 500 companies in this region. And it was a great experience. It was not anything that I would have thought to do. I didn't study employment law in law school necessarily. But when I got into it, I really enjoyed it. And the more that I did, I realized that what I really enjoyed was helping the business people with their problems, which is very different, than helping individuals who might have gotten hurt or pursuing some other angle of the law. I liked what we were doing. We were in federal court. We were very involved in really helping these businesses, as I mentioned. And so from there, I said, okay, you know what? Employment law I like a lot, but it's very specialized. And it's a part of business, but it's not really the main focus of most businesses. And I really enjoyed contract and transactional law more than going to court. And so that's really a big place where that change came from. In employment law, you're kind of a hybrid. You go to court and you are fighting on behalf of these companies, but I don't really enjoy the fighting. So the hybrid part of it is you do a lot of transactional things where you're doing employment handbooks or employment contracts, non-competes, things like that. And from that side of it that I really enjoyed, which to me felt more like building the business than fighting about it, led me into more of a transactional practice. And I switched law firms. I switched to corporate securities work, did that for a number of years back in the 90s. And part of that corporate securities work was M&A. And so we were very focused as a very, very large national firm. The Orlando office is where I was located. Worked there for a number of years, got experience. And part of what we did on the M&A side, we're helping, mostly sellers, some buyers buying and selling. We did a lot of actually IPO work. That was back in the tech boom time. Saw a very large shift at one point in that practice, because when the tech boom went bust, we were all kind of sitting around looking at each other saying, what do we do now? There wasn't a whole lot of IPO work. There wasn't a lot of M&A work. There wasn't much of anything at that stage back late 90s, early 2000s, really early 2000s. So from there, I decided that I really wanted to just focus on business transactions. And I continued to do a lot of general corporate work, but also have spent the last kind of 15 years pivoting and focusing more and more on M&A and buying and selling of businesses.
Yeah. Now, when you were in court, like, were you ever tempted, like after watching, like, what year did you graduate?
Law school 95.
Okay. So A Few Good Men, right in that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he yells out, "You can't handle the truth." Like, were you ever tempted to do something like that crazy in court?
No.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right. So
you might think about it in the back of your head, but you're also thinking, I don't want to go before the bar. I don't want this judge throwing me out of the courtroom. The reality of that is it sounds great and it would be awesome to do, but in real life, you'd get in real trouble.
Yeah. So you do that the day before retirement, right? Like that's the last time you go to court. You're like, oh, I'm gonna pull a liar or a My Cousin Vinny or right. Like that kind of thing. So out of all the movies and shows about lawyers and such, what was your favorite?
I got to go with My Cousin Vinny that you mentioned. It's being just a fun movie. It has very little to do with real law practice, but it's just a great fun movie.
Yeah, no, it's a great movie. I like that. Utes. So, all right. So here we are building your practice. How long have you been in your practice?
So I'm in my 26th year of practice now.
26 years. Holy moly. All right. So you've learned a few things. What could go wrong in a deal, right? Like you've
Sure.
seen it. You've seen a lot of stuff from IPOs and the .com boom and bust. You've seen, the whole thing with 2008 and what's going on in the world there. Now you're seeing a different side of the coin where a lot of people, baby boomers, the silver tsunami, the seller tsunami, you're seeing a lot of people buying and selling businesses, right? You said you were so freaking busy.
Yes.
What are you seeing? That's what are you seeing, right? Just paint a picture for what you see from your side, and maybe give us some advice as deal makers out here for the process of buying.
Yeah. So we're looking at a number of situations. I've got as we talked about earlier, involvement with business brokers, and I know that they are all very busy. I see deals come in. We see some of them unfortunately fall apart, and we see a new buyer coming in 2 weeks later. We'll get the same deal back in with a new buyer, and so we're seeing a lot of activity there on the larger deals. Which again, in this region, I look at as anything over $1 million is a little bit larger for this region. But we're seeing deals where, everybody is active. I mean, just a lot of activity. We see a lot of sellers who are interested in selling, who have maybe engaged a broker or an investment banker type, and they're getting lots of offers that they're dealing with, and they're calling me to help. I've got 3 LOIs. Tell me, what do you think of these 3 different LOIs, and let's engage you to help with this deal. And we are seeing unsolicited LOIs coming in. I've had several of those. I think I had 2, or 1 last week and 1 the week before. So just to how often it's coming up, where folks have called me, business owners, and they've said, I've gotten LOIs in, and I was not planning on selling my business, but this is a pretty good deal. And, with their age and their where they are in their lives, they're thinking, yeah, this might be a good time to do the sale. And so we're seeing that as well.
Yeah. All right. acronyms aside, tell us what LOI means, and then walk us through like the good and the bad of LOIs. Like, here's how to do it right, guys. Right? If you're a private investor looking to acquire a business, here's the right way to do it. Here's the really wrong way to do it. What does LOI mean? Let's start there.
All right, so letter of intent, and generally letter of intent is used for larger, again, $1 million plus, which, if you're in New York, you don't consider $1 million plus deal to be a large deal. That's tiny. But in the Central Florida region, that's the start of a decent sized deal. But anyway, so any deals, many deals, most deals, you're going to see a letter of intent as the first step. And what we're really looking for here is a document that explains what the buyer is willing to do on a high level, and give the seller an opportunity to negotiate if that's appropriate based on whatever the sale price offered by the buyer. So usually the buyer drafts it or their attorney drafts it, and they send it in to the seller, and seller decides if it's something they want to accept or counter.
Got it. So on a letter of intent, is it binding, right? So I send you a letter of intent and I go, hey, Pamela, right? I'm looking to buy your company, right? Here's a letter of intent. Is it binding? What things should I have on the letter? Now I know you're not going to give full out, legal advice here, but like general practice, what have you seen that's good? And what are you seeing that's unnecessary or harmful?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of detail we can go into, but let me start with the idea that usually letter of intents are non-binding. And one of the things that people need to be very careful about is to make sure it stays non-binding. So there's some things you can do where if you get too specific on term, not too specific, but if you've outlined every specific term in the deal and you have not said it's non-binding, there's a possibility it could actually be a binding contract. So that's the first thing to kind of look at and make sure that everybody's on the same page as to whether or not it really is binding. Generally, we want to keep it non-binding because it doesn't have enough detail. I would expect a letter of intent to be between 2 to 4 pages, and we would see things like the purchase price, any kind of holdbacks might be listed. I find that the more detail as far as price, payment type, like if they want seller financing, if they're going to have any type of outside financing that they need to get on the buyer side, maybe it's a pledge fund, not an actual fund, to the extent that they can list things that both sides come into it with open eyes. And so the seller can realize that this isn't a cash payment of $6 million. It's a cash, it's a $6 million purchase price. It's a cash payment of $4 million. And then there's $1 million of maybe a holdback. And then maybe there's $1 million earnout, and, any number of different things like that. And from a buyer's perspective, the more of that you can have in the letter of intent, the easier it is later on when we go to do the full purchase agreement, because a lot of those major terms that we would fight about have already been decided. From a seller perspective, the actual terms of the deal are very helpful to really fully understand how it's going to get paid out, so that they can, if they have more than one LOI, the seller could compare apples to apples and try to really understand what the different terms mean.
Yeah. Now, if I'm outside, looking in at a private company, Pamela, she has a pool company, right? Like, how do I know what to even offer, right? I look at her, I see some trucks with some cool branding, and I go, that's an interesting business. And someone said she might be willing to sell one day. How do I know what to offer? How do I know what to I just want to start the conversation. Like, how do I get that going?
Well, I guess there's a couple different ways. One option would be to talk to a business broker or an investment banker for larger deals. And those guys generally are dealing, especially you can find somebody who's dealing in the space or has somebody in their company, like Transworld has a ton of brokers. I'm sure there's somebody in there who's done a pool route deal lately or whatever it is. And so you can go that route and get their help. There are actual valuation experts you could bring in. I think that is difficult because they can be very expensive, and they're generally not going to be able to get the full information they need to do a true valuation from the seller until there's something in writing.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I'm not sure what people do. Sometimes they've got experience from their background as to this area and they want to get back into it. And sometimes they've got a friend or some sort of contact that gives them the information.
Okay. Now let's jump on the side of Pamela. So, Pamela's my business partner. We come to you, Ken, and we go, hey, someone was watching a bunch of, these online videos on how to buy a business with no money down and such like that. And we just received 13 LOIs unsolicited. We haven't been talking to anybody. We got all these unsolicited LOIs. I don't know what's going on in the world right now, but like, what should we look for? How do we know which one is serious and which one's not? Right. So help us look at these 13 and now give me and Pamela some guidance.
Okay. So again, looking at the terms of payment is a big thing.
Yeah.
If they're talking 6 million in cash and maybe there's some holdbacks or not, it still sounds like a better deal than if it's 3 million in cash, 2 million in seller financing, and a $1 million holdback or a $1 million earnout, or however they want to structure it. So the structure of the payment of the purchase price is critical for the seller, and a real helpful determinant amongst LOIs. I think beyond that, looking at again, I mentioned before, a VC group might have a pledge fund versus an actual fund, and a pledge fund being something where they claim they have $10 million to buy businesses on this roll up, or 100 million, or whatever the number is. And in truth, they have 5 million in the bank, or 1 million in the bank, or zero in the bank. And what they have is a lot of accredited investors who have said, if you find a good company and I like what you do or the deal that you're getting, or whatever criteria they've got in place, I will then give you 50, 100,000, a million, 2 million, whatever it is. And that's a really difficult situation. I've had a deal a couple of weeks ago, about a month and a half ago now, actually, where they had to restructure the deal in the middle of it because a bunch of the investors backed out. And fortunately, the folks on the buy side were able to come up with other funding and make the deal happen. But there was a couple of days where the seller was very frustrated. And so that's important to understand, where the buyer's getting the money from.
Yeah. Now, if we're looking at a stack of 13 LOIs, we spread them across your table. You and I are having some coffee, and we're sitting there looking at it. And you quickly glance and you go, "Oh, that one's complete bullshit." What did you see that you said just throw that one out? That one's just complete garbage.
There's so many different things. I probably would start with, again, seller financing.
Yeah.
I've seen them where they come in, and it basically is, we're going to take your business off your hands, and we'll pay you profits out of that business for 5 years, hopefully. And it just makes zero sense, because why would a seller sell to somebody else to run their business and hopefully pay it?
Yeah.
They might as well just stay involved.
Yeah.
That's probably the most obvious. Beyond that, it could just be any number of terms that are laid out by the buyer that just don't make sense.
Yeah. Now, the one that you see after you're looking across the 13, we threw one out that was just like, hey, we'll pay you out of the profits. Nobody will tell you what an actual profit is here, but we'll pay you out of the profits for the next 5 years. And hopefully we run your business well. We've never run a pool company before, right. But here we go. We'll take it over. We can do it better than you. So we throw that one away. We go, okay, that one's garbage. And then you look at and you say, wow, this is the real deal right here. What's that one thing that you see just by glancing over, the 12 remaining one that you go, this is a real LOI?
Well, again, there's a lot of different things, but it might be recognizing who the buyer is. If it's a big national company, you recognize the name, you're like, okay, this is serious. Those guys aren't going to waste their time. Be it a VC fund that you recognize, or an actual company, or whatever it is, strategic purchase. If you see, what else would you think? That's probably major.
Yeah. Now, what about a verbal, right? So we have an email, or like someone called and left a voice message. Hey, this is Josh, Pamela. I'm interested in buying your business. I'll buy it for like a couple $1 million cash, cash deal. You want it? Not. So, how do you approach something like that? Is that binding, non-binding?
Very not binding. And, the letter of intent is supposed to be non-binding, but the whole purpose of it is to put it in writing, black and white, so that you can read it, you can feel it and touch it in a sense, and start to evaluate it properly. When somebody tells you something over the phone, essentially they give you a message. That would be horrible. They call you on the phone, actually have a conversation with you. That I've heard about that in situations, but usually it's more of a feeling out. It's, hey, we're interested in businesses like yours. We think you might be a good fit for what we're doing, and would you be interested? And if they go in, generally the response from sellers, I expect, is I'll always listen. Most of the time you're going to hear that. And so then from there, the seller may ask for a verbal, or the parties may have a verbal discussion of a range, which is more common. The buyer will say, I'm looking for businesses of your size. We pay generally between 5 million and 10 million, depending on profitability and this and that and the other. And that's fine. And then beyond, but once it gets about to that point, it needs to be put into writing. And that's where we really see, again, these terms. It's easy to say, we're going to pay you $10 million for the business, but then we need to see in writing, how is that going to get paid? What's the plan to accomplish this? And another thing that sort of goes back to looking at these LOIs and evaluating them is, what does the seller want post-closing, and what is the buyer offering post-closing? And by that I mean, do they want to employ the seller? Do they want the seller to do a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month transition, or do they want the seller to go away, or do they want the seller to become a sales manager for the next 2 years? And so there's a lot of different options, and that's part of the evaluation as far as what makes sense for the seller. Are they in their 70s and they're really just looking to sell and get out of the business, or they're in their 50s and they'd like to take some cash off the table but get into a strategic opportunity where they can grow the business a lot bigger and get other ways of future rewards.
Now, let's just say I'm a newbie in the game, right? And we're working together, and you're mentoring me. And you're saying, Josh, when you're buying a business, when you're writing up these docs, when you're doing this is one sure, tell that you've never done this before, right? So how do you spot a newbie in the acquisition game?
Well, as far as a buyer, I would say on the acquisition side, it really would depend on, it's hard to tell, but I guess it would be how they detailed the purchase price, as far as payment options, how it's going to be paid out, how much detail they got into in the LOI. There are some LOIs, again, that are very detailed, and they're going into indemnity provision and how that's going to be handled, if there's going to be a cap on potential indemnities, if there's going to be, how the due diligence is going to work, how long that's going to be, what's going to be involved. That can tell you sort of how they look at it. But it also, it depends on who's talking and who's sending the LOI. Is it the CEO of the company? Is it the M&A guy in-house for the company? Is it the attorney for the company? Is it some guy who's a wannabe broker who's just sort of popped up, and he's gone to both sides and said, hey, buyer, if I brought you the perfect deal, would you buy it? And the buyer says, well, sure, if you bring me the perfect deal. And then he goes to the seller and says, hey, you're not planning on selling, but I've got a perfect buyer for you. And sometimes that can work out, but a lot of the time, this guy in the middle is not experienced. He's the newbie, and he's going to be a problem. And he's kind of promising both sides what they want to hear. And then everybody gets together and realizes that there's a problem, and then it all falls apart.
Yeah. That's cool, man. So you've been doing this for 26 years, right? What does the perfect day, right? So when you go home to your family and you're like, that was such an awesome day. What does an awesome day look like for a corporate attorney?
Well, for me, it basically is going through the process of putting a deal together, getting to the finish line, getting it closed, making sure all the pieces have been put together, the funding has gone out, seller has received their money, we've got all the docs signed, everybody's happy, and you just know it all came together and it worked, and that's a good day.
That's a good day. What's a tough day for a corporate attorney? Like we're hanging out after work and you're like, man, today was brutal. I'm like, go ahead, tell me, man. Let's have a cup of coffee or a cocktail or something. Tell me
You
about
know,
your day.
it's a variety of possibilities, certainly. It could be a client who blames me for the whole deal falling apart when, you know, I don't always know what's going to happen, but as we go through this, and based on my experience, I might say, hey, this could be a problem. And you've got very headstrong sellers who say, nope, I don't care, this is how we're doing it. Or you've got a buyer who says, no, 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 we always make this work, don't worry about it. And then they come back after the fact and they say, this was a mistake. And it's difficult. So that's, I guess, potentially an issue. Just really, the worst thing for me is when we've put together a deal, the whole thing is closed, and then they start fighting, and that's just unfortunate, and I really hate to see that.
Yeah. All right. So when you work on with a client, you guys have done a bunch of transactions, right? You get these like contracts, these, 20, 30, 40-page contracts that you have to read.
Mhm.
What's your secret to getting through a 30-page doc, a 30-page contract? Because the devil's in the details for you guys. Do you
Sure.
do these mornings over coffee, like at night when the kids are in bed? Like what's your secret?
It really is all the above, honestly. Because we're so busy right now, especially, it could be first thing in the morning, after I work out and take a shower, and then I'll spend an hour on a document or 2 hours before I get into work. It could be during work, and I've just got to stop answering the phone and just focus on it. It could be in the evenings after the kids go to bed. Absolutely. Just varies. And it really is just, sometimes you just have to do a couple pages, take a break, do a couple more pages. Most purchase agreements are in sections. I mean, obviously, but you can kind of approach each one separately and then see how they all work together. To be honest with you, if I have a 30-page contract, I'm excited. That's fine. It's, I literally have one right now that's 80 pages, and
Oh,
I'm just not, I'm frankly pissed. I think the buyer's attorney I'm on the seller side on this one. The buyer's attorney prepared the contract, and it was a 4-page LOI that was reasonably well done. And then we get this 80-page monstrosity contract, and I'm pissed off for my client because it's taken me forever to get through it. It's a lot of detail that is just unnecessary in my view. But that's how it goes, and that's what we have to work with, and so you just have to get through it.
you got to get through it. What are some tools or some, tricks of the trades for getting through like a bear of that, right? So you said that it's in sections, so that's good. Do you have
Yeah.
any technology or tools, or do you have a specific note taking like tip, or do you use like stick 'em notes? Like what do you use? Give us some insight.
Well, it really varies day to day, but generally speaking, I have multiple colored pens, I have highlighters, and I have sticky notes, and I'll use all of them depending on uh, how much needs to be changed in the contract and what I'm trying to convey and how I'm going to figure out what we need to do.
Okay, got it. So sticky notes and colored pens. So like you're kind of an artist when you're writing up these docs, and
It's
you
not
take.
necessarily pretty, but yeah.
Got it. All right. So in the world of attorneys, so you're going out hanging out with an attorney. What's some attorney chat that you're going to have with a fellow transactional attorney who might be on the West Coast? You guys are hanging out, nobody else is around. Like, what are the topics that you guys are going to discuss over nice steak dinner?
Wow. Probably deals that we have ongoing and deals we've closed, and just industry things, peculiarities amongst deals. Um, Oftentimes it's a pain in the butt client who you've had to suffer through, and glad to get done with them, or you're in the middle with them. And um, that for me, there are clients who are too involved, or too it's not they're too involved, but they're calling you every 3 hours and saying, where are we on this and where are we on that, and you're like, I'm working on it, give me a chance. And there are other clients who don't call you at all, and you get caught up in all the different deals, and then you're like, wait, I gotta find out what's going on with this deal. I haven't heard from this guy in a couple of days. um, and they're very difficult to reach. They're so involved in their business, and they're not really focusing on this deal, and that can be problematic as well.
All right. So we're having steak dinner, me, you, and this other attorney, and the perfect deal comes across the table and it like gets all of our attention. What does that perfect deal look like?
I'm trying to figure out how this perfect deal comes across at our steak dinner, but
It just dropped out of the sky, or the waitress or waiter came by and just said, "Hey."
Sure. You know, I don't know. I don't think there is such a thing as perfect deals, but it really would be, I will tell you some of my favorite or better deals are when, you know, you've got a seller who is just a great guy and you just really enjoy talking to them. You enjoy helping them. You're excited for them to, you know, take their cash off the table, excuse me, and move into whatever they want to do next from this, whether it's staying with the business or moving on. And then you've got a buyer who is just great, and they're, you know, it's all about people. And so it could be, you know, I had a deal that I did over in Tampa, and the purchaser was a company that was backed out with a VC fund out of Boston, and they had a large company, and this branch was in the southern region, we'll say, of the U.S., and the headquarters was in the Midwest. But just everybody we talked to was great, and everybody was pulling their oars in the same direction. When a problem arose, everybody would hop on the phone, everybody would talk it through. There was no threatening, no games, you know, and it just was everybody working together and getting the deal done. And there were some difficulties. There were some things that the tax advisors had come up with that they wanted everybody to do that I didn't necessarily agree with, and we were able to work through it and figure out how to make it where the you know, it made sense for everybody. So it was a win-win, and you know, that's a great deal.
Yeah. All right. So you and I are working, you know, we're hanging out, we're working together, and for some reason someone comes by and they say, "Hey, Ken, I want to buy your law practice," right? And you say, you know, you look at the LOI, you're like, "Ah, this one's bullshit." But another one came across the table and actually looked good. And you go, "Okay, maybe we'll pay attention to this." So we have a big exit. Once again, go to a steak dinner, we're hanging out, and you go, "You know, I'm kind of young. I'm not ready to fully retire.
Right.
What are you and I going to build together? What kind of thing would get your interest?"
So you're saying something outside of the practice?
Maybe. Yeah. You had an exit event. Someone bought your practice, and now you're going, "What should I do with my time?" How old are you, Ken?
53.
Okay, so I'm 53. I got 20 more years in the game. I'm not ready to hang up my hat. What are you going to do?
You know what? I mean, realistically, someone bought the practice, they're buying me, and I'm staying involved. But you know, from a fantasy standpoint, it's you know, it's probably too late to go play professional sports. So I'd have to say, you know, maybe try to become an agent. That always seemed like it'd be fun. Maybe start a business, you know, doing something through the internet, something where people would be buying stuff that you don't have to be involved every minute. This certainly would be fun to me.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So you have, I believe you have kids, right?
Yes.
And they're okay. So I don't know what age they are, but they're kind of grown up. Do you see any future attorneys?
You know, it's funny that you ask, because my oldest daughter, she's at Florida State, and she, since she was little, has said she was going to be a doctor. And she's pre-med, neuroscience, and international affairs, dual major at Florida State. And she's done very well. And as part of her process to learn to become a doctor, or to get into med school and all of that, she had to do a lot of shadowing and different activities in the medical area. And one of the things she did was to become an EMT. So she's a licensed EMT and has done all that. And she just came out a couple of months ago and said, "You know what? I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer," I think. It really took my wife and I a bit by surprise, but it's great. So we're looking forward to seeing what she ends up doing with it. And she's still got to take the LSAT and figure out where and what she wants to do. But it definitely is interesting.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, you know, you learn a lot being in a box on an ambulance, or, you know, as an EMT. I was an EMT medic for a while, and you learn a lot. And I think shadowing, I think many programs, I think, are so good for college kids. Like, I went through college, I had no clue what I want to do, and I had 100 careers since then. but
Yeah.
like I think it's so valuable. Now, let's just say you and I go back to school, and we just hung up the musical instrument, and you're looking with all the knowledge, if you could go back and give yourself a piece of knowledge about the future business attorney world, like what advice would you give yourself? You're like, hey man, maybe you want to explore this.
It's a good question. Um, I think, I don't know if this quite answers the question exactly, but I think back, and if I was to do it again instead of political science, even though I had a good time with that, learned a lot. I worked for a congressman. I did a lot of things that were entertaining and enjoyable. But I think if I did it over again, I might actually major in accounting, which is something that when I can remember in high school or college or something, and everybody was like, "Oh, accounting, that's so boring." But I deal with it regularly in these deals, and I don't think it's boring. I actually enjoy it, and so I've actually thought about even today going back and getting a tax law degree, getting an LLM, just because I would like to get additional knowledge in the tax field, and there's a lot of ways that these deals involve taxes and can be structured differently to help with taxes, and so I work a lot with that. So that is something that I could go back and think about. I mean, on the other side, part of me thinks, what, I should have been a computer coder, right? We all want to be like an Elon Musk or one of these guys who can just rule the world with all of these internet things.
Yeah, rule the world with zeros and ones, right?
Yeah.
So once again, we're hanging out, dinner, and you go, hey Josh, before you leave, and you pull out a book from your briefcase. You're like, you got to read this, personal or business, doesn't matter. You hand me a book and you go, Josh, you got to read this book. What is it?
Actually, it's one my client gave me. Well, she didn't give me the book. She told me the name. But there's a biography about Phil Knight from Nike.
Shoe
That is
Dog,
a great
right?
read.
Was it the Shoe Dog one?
Yeah, I think that's right. Shoe Dog. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
That is a great read. I really enjoyed that. Beyond that, for business owners, the E-Myth is always a classic. That taught me a lot, and even though it's relatively short, I think that's a really good book too.
Got it. All right. So as we're kind of wrapping up towards the end of this interview, we talked about letter of intent. What are they? And binding, non-binding. Do you have any more things to touch on letter of intents specifically, or do you think we covered it?
Oh, there's I probably talk for another hour about specific things.
Yeah.
But I think it's important just to look at them within the context of the business and what makes sense. Again, trying to have good detail in them. Addressing things up front, I think, is always better than trying to, I don't want to say hide, but think that they can be easier to be dealt with later on. And I think there's a sort of natural inclination for some people to think, what, we're not going to mention these issues until we really dig into the company financials and we really have our due diligence going and we really understand, and then we can come in and we can address this, because we're so far along, the seller will never back out. And I think that sometimes that's less helpful than just really addressing things that could be an issue later on, trying to get that in the letter of intent and get agreement on it, and everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. Is there a way to, or what have you seen a way to kind of leave room for flexibility of the future, right? Like I might say, hey, my letter of intent, I think based on looking from the inside out, right, or outside in, that your business might be worth $5 million.
Right.
But I don't really know until I look at your financials, until I look at, your employee load, your liability list, your debt service. Like, I don't know until is there ways to make sure that I'm not setting myself up for failure? Because then that $5 million really might be a $3 million true offer. What have you seen? Or is that handled later on? What have you seen?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I think that there's, as a buyer, you want to come in with your best offer that you think will make sense based on what you know about the business, but you've got to caveat it with the idea that this is potentially going to change. And we certainly have seen in many deals where they come in and the hope for the seller is and frankly for the buyer in some ways, because I don't like it as a negotiating tactic. There are times when the buyer comes in, they set a price knowing that they're going to beat the heck out of the seller once they have a chance to look through their documents. There may be some issues as far as seller benefits or the way seller has done their accounting that the buyer is intending to take advantage of. And I think that's unfortunate. And so I'm not a big fan of that. I think it causes deals to crater more often than they should. And so to me, I think that's important.
Okay. As we, as we're going through, and there's one other question that you wish I would ask you, or anybody in the world, it could be business or personal, like what question do you wish someone would ask you that you like talking about?
Man, I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. I'm fairly wide open, but yeah, it's I don't know.
All right. So here's one out of left field. All right. So we just closed a big deal, right? Big deal for the law firm. It was awesome for the buyer, the seller, everybody got along. Incredible. The deal came from the waiter. Like, it was incredible, like great referral. Like, how do you celebrate on a victory? Like, what are some ways that you take a minute to pause and go, that was cool, I'm going to celebrate?
Man, I guess it's actually shutting off work and going home and being with the family and just enjoying some time away from the deals.
Yeah. Yeah. Every once in a while, it's good to take a pause and go, wow, we won. Gonna go hang out with the family. Well, cool, man. So for our fellow deal maker listeners who listen in, they go, Ken, I like you. And, I want to do a deal with you, or I need some help on a deal that I'm working on. What's a good place for people to connect with you and do a deal together?
Sure. So my law firm is called Moran Kidd. It's Moran Kidd Lyons Johnson Garcia, and located in Orlando. We've got a Miami office as well. You can call us 407-841-4141. Our website is www.morankid.com, and appreciate anybody who needs help, and glad to talk to them.
Sounds good. So fellow deal makers out there, if you're looking for some help, as always, reach out to our guests that come on the show and say, hey, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing the information. Reach out to them and say thank you, and reach out to them and find a way to do a deal together. That's the mission and purpose of the show, is to put deals and people together. So always reach out to our guests directly. Their information will be in the show notes below. And if you're working on a deal or would like to know more about a deal or hunting for a deal, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you, everybody.
Thank you.